Good evening, church. Good to be here in the house of the Lord tonight. A couple of announcements as we get started. Remember, homecoming is coming up in just a couple of weeks. September 10th, Pastor Lucas Walker will be speaking for us from Rocky Hill. So excited about having him here. Make sure you bring a covered dish fellowship meal for that afterwards on that 10th. This coming Sunday, there will not be Brotherhood nor evening services due to Labor Day. And so make sure if you're a man and you want to show up at 8 o'clock, that'll be fine. I'll be here. We can hang out in my office. And but if not, there won't be any food for you. I'll have a cup of coffee. I can make you a cup of coffee. And we can hang out for a little bit, but we just won't have a meal for this Sunday for Brotherhood. The 10th will also be that evening. Pastor Bradley's will be speaking revival there at Fairview. They'll be having the choir singing as a combined choir. And so if you're in the choir, make sure you see Mark for the different times to be practicing for those things. Other than that, we've got our Israel trip coming up. If you're interested in going, one of our deposits is quickly approaching, but we still have just a couple of spots. We're getting real close to being full, so if you're wanting to go, please let me know. And then Hospice, as you see there, is doing that's tomorrow. They're doing a fundraiser, Porta Pit Chicken. If you want to be a part of that, that'd be great. I did find out, someone asked me about the Red Box Ministry for the incarcerated women. They're taking up the knitted one-size-fits-all gloves. So if you're going to shop for those, buy the ones that you would buy like dollar store in the Walmart section where they sell the little gloves, not food preparation gloves, but gloves to keep people warm during that time. So I think that's all of the ministry opportunities that we have. I know we have the young married couple is taking up a collection for Daniel and Caitlin for the new baby. Good to see them here tonight as well. So if you want to help donate for that, they're doing wipes, diapers, gift cards, all the fun things that new parents need. Any other announcements? All right. If you have your prayer guide, we'll go give you some updates on some things. Mary Crouch, continue to pray for her. She's having knee recovery surgery. Miss Shirley Grider's home, continue to lift her up. Miss Ruth with her health, still having some different problems there. Martha's surgery went well. They had to repair part of her intestines, and so due to that, they had to put similar to what a colostomy bag that she'll have to have for 3 to 6 months, and then they're going to have to do that surgery again in 3 to 6 months. So she was in a lot of pain yesterday evening, but just to continue to pray for her during this time. She'll be in the hospital till at least about Friday, recovering. And then Billy McClellan had surgery. His surgery went well. Continue to pray for Miss Joyce. Miss Kay Neubauer, she had her surgery on Tuesday. It went well. She's in a lot of pain as well. And they had to put a feeding tube in to help her, but she's doing some therapy. And Miss Melinda said she's doing much better, but she'll be there at least until Friday, if not longer. And so just remember her during this time. All of our schools, as they're starting back, it's our August prayer focus as they're starting back, but also September is our church's prayer focus, and that's on the calendar, the different weeks that we're praying for there. So be praying for that. And then also, like I said last week, continue to pray for our family as we transition. A lot of things going on there, and for the church as well, as Good News Club is starting back, and Tutor Ministry will be starting back in October, and so do remember to pray for those things. Any other requests that we can pray for this evening?
Chelsea Smith is on there, I believe.
Yes, you told me that.
She's about 24, has 2 small children. They called hospice in. She has cancer that's
Yeah. Chelsea Smith, if you couldn't hear that, she's on our prayer list on her cancer. She's 24, got 2 kids. She had cancer, did treatment, everything came out well, was having some problems, went back to the oncologist, I think is what I understand. They discovered that cancer had come back aggressively, and they said that there was no way to treat it, and they called in hospice, and so not looking good, and so be praying for that family, Chelsea Smith. And they've got 2 young children as well. So continue to pray for is his last name Hall? the boy with needing the heart transplant? Jack Wall. Continue to pray for him as well. He just came to my mind as well, as he's looking to get that heart transplant. Okay, Kelly Watson. Yeah, New Life there in town. She's had several health problems over the last year or so as well. So do continue to pray for that. They also lost their grandson a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago now. Yeah, so a lot of heartache there. So be praying for that. UNC faculty and staff and students, was a shooting there if you didn't hear about that. And so one staff member passed away. So be praying for that. Also the hurricane coming in, I know that hit Florida and seeing some damage there. Our North Carolina Baptists will definitely be responding to clean up there. They are saying it's going to hit North Carolina a little bit, depending on what they're looking at. And so be prepared for that this weekend. Anything else?
My friend, neighbor, Mary Cunningham, she is in college also, and she's having a lot of trouble with her breathing.
You said Mary
Tutterrow.
Okay, Mary Tutterrow, Tutterrow. Is it Catawba? Having trouble breathing. Anything else?
Mitchell Gold.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot to mention that. Mitchell Gold, the shutting down of that. Continue to pray for them. I think someone told me it's 5% of the county is employed by them, about 1,000 workers. And so definitely a hard-hitting time there with our, we'll see an increase in our pantry and other things that we help out with. And so just a way we can help in many different ways there. If you haven't heard it, Rick Gilbert did an interview with Mitchell Gold. I listened to it today. It's about 18 minutes long. It was pretty well-worded, I guess, if you want to say well-worded. He said some things that were backwards in his thinking, but at least he did address the issue a couple of times. So if you're interested in what happened there, you can go and listen to that as well. Anything else?
Fatalities in the past week here in the county, so they will keep those families in prayer.
Yeah. There's one up on 16 and one up in North Wilkes. And then I think one over here in Statesville I saw the other day. So.
One in Ellendale today, Omi Eckert was killed.
Okay, one in Elladale, you said who was killed?
Omi Eckert.
Omi Eckert. I don't know who that is, but Omi Eckert. Be praying for that family. Anything else? All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. We're going to stand and sing in just a minute. Father, thank you for this day. Lord, we love you and we thank you for your blessings, allowing us to come into your house tonight, be able to worship you through song here in just a little bit, through praise, through the testimony that Ethan's going to give us. I pray, God, that you would just continue to help us, continue to be with these requests. So many ones that are struggling on our sickness list. Miss Martha that had surgery this week, and Miss Kay and Billy McClellan that are recovering and just going through a difficult time. I pray, God, that you'd give them the strength that they need. Be with Mary Tutterrow, who's at Catawba, just having trouble breathing, God. I pray that you just give your hand of anointing on them and give the doctors wisdom, Lord, as they try to figure out what's going on there. I pray that you be with our community, Lord, as our students are starting back school and have started back this week, and as they go and begin to get back into the classroom, into the routine of things, Lord, that you would give them the patience and the teachers' patience as well, calm their nerves and lots of anxiety that can come with that, God. I just pray that you'll help our students in that area. Lord, be with the community. Lord, over 1,000 people have lost their job with the Mitchell Gold closing down, that you would give them peace and comfort, help them to find the job that they need as they continue to provide for their family. many people that are going to be struggling, that are going to be hurting over the next couple of weeks and months, not knowing how they're going to make ends meet. But Lord, I just know that you are a great God and have this opportunity for us to be a blessing to our community, be a blessing to reach out to those that we may know that are hurting, and be a way to help at their physical need, ultimately, Lord, to help out with their spiritual need of knowing you as their Savior. I pray, God, that you would help us to use these opportunities. We may not know why they're happening now, but Lord, you've divinely appointed it to happen for a reason. I pray, God, that you would help us not to forsake that. I pray, God, that you would help us as we continue to pray for the UNC Chapel Hill shooting that happened as students were returning back, and I'm sure some are dealing with this in ways that they never expected. Maybe a staff member they really highly respected. I don't know the exact person, but God, I pray that you'll be with those students as they try to figure out life. They try to figure out if they're safe, if they're not, how they're going to deal with that. Be with the counselors up there, the churches up there. They're going to be able to help minister to those people. They're going to be able to help minister to those students that are going to be asking questions of why this happened. And Lord, I pray that you give them the right wisdom and answers to be able to give that to them. I pray, God, that you'll be with Chelsea Smith, Lord. Lord, that she just is going through this very difficult time. Lord, I could not imagine my wife at 24, 2 kids, passing away and just giving that ultimate answer of not being there. Lord, I just know that he's going to have questions. He's going to have answers. I don't know where their salvation is at, what they're trusting in, but God, I pray that this will be a time where they can draw close to you. The church can maybe reach out to them and love on them and be a blessing to them, God. I pray, Lord, that you'll just help them as they go through this time. Lord, be with our ministries as the school starting back with Good News Club, starting back on the 11th, and tutoring ministry beginning back on the October 5th. Lord, that you would just give the workers that are needed there and those students that are coming to get answers, whether it be for physical help of a question on homework or maybe a spiritual need that they may have, God, that we will be there to love and care for them in a way that only we can do through your help. Lord, I thank you for your blessings. I thank you for what you've done for us. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Let's all stand, stretch our legs a little bit, and sing.
With all the tragedy and heartache and sickness that James was just talking about and you guys mentioned, it makes me long for heaven even more. So we're going to sing about that. Sweet by and by.
To prepare us
As Ethan makes his way up here, Janet had a scare this week. She had to go to the hospital, but I think everything came out well, and so it's good to see her here as well, so that's a good thing. And if you also remember me tomorrow, I'm speaking to the middle school students at Statesville Christian. I'll be speaking 3 times. They have a little fall retreat. They'll be gone all day tomorrow, so I get to preach 3 messages to them. Even though they're Christian school students, they still need Jesus, and some of them I know don't know him because I'm around the school a little bit. And so hopefully it's been an opportunity for me to share God's word with them and have the gospel to them. And so be praying for me then. I'll be, like I said, 3 times tomorrow speaking. But Ethan's coming today. He's sharing his testimony from everything that happened with Glenn and how God used that situation. And he's probably going to speak for about an hour, hour and a half. So buckle in, get ready. He's not nervous at all or anything. And so Ethan's going to come speak to us and enjoy what he's got to say.
Well, this is way out of my comfort zone, and I can promise you, you're probably going to get out early tonight. So that's one good thing that's going to come out of it. And I just ask you to pray for me because I've really been struggling the past couple of days as I've been really just studying and preparing for this. I've told Alexa many times that it honestly scares me just reading back through kind of what's happened in the past couple months and just having to kind of relive that just to kind of prepare. But it also makes me thankful. I'm thankful for a church that prays. Thankful that the Lord has answered a lot of prayers for our family, because in reality, right there's a testimony right there. There's no other way to explain it other than what the Lord's done. We've heard it from countless doctors, and no one else can explain it, but we can explain it. The Lord's looked out for us, and that's all there is to it. And I've struggled today and yesterday that I don't want this to be a story. I don't want this to just come across as a story. I want it to be a testimony of what the Lord's done. And that's what the devil's been putting in my mind today is, you're just going to get up there and you're going to tell a story and about what's happened. But in reality, it's a lot more than that to me and to our family, just how the Lord's worked. And I hope it is to you as well, because I don't want it to be anything about me, anything about Daddy, anything about what's happened. I want it to be what the Lord has done. So, as a lot of you know, April 17th, 2023, I was on the phone with Mama. I was on my way home from work. I was running late. It was about 5:30, and she was just talking, just a normal conversation. And the next thing I know, she said, "I got to call 911 on your daddy, bye," and hung up the phone. And I was almost to McLean Road, and I was like, what in the world's going on? So I cut down McLean Road, just went straight to their house, and I texted Alexa, and I said, I don't know what's going on, but Mom's calling 911 on Dad. So I said, get Lydia and come back to the house, because they were both coming here for Zumba that night. And I got to the house, I got there, and Dad's just sitting there on the recliner, just like this right here, and he was covered in sweat. And he said, I just feel like my head's in a vice. And then Mama was still on the phone with 911 when I got there. He said, I feel like I need to go to the bathroom, but when he went to stand up, he couldn't walk. He couldn't see. And so I got on one side of him, and Mama got on one side of him, and we said, come on, we'll get you to the bathroom while we're waiting on the EMS. And we walked around the side of the wall, headed towards the bathroom, and he just went limp on us. And he couldn't walk. We couldn't get him any farther, and he said, I'm not going to make it. So luckily they have a desk right there in the hallway, and I grabbed that chair from the desk, and I just threw it under him. I said, sit down. I said, we're not going to make it to the bathroom if you do what you need to do, but we're not going to make it to the bathroom. At that point, his head was still pounding. He couldn't see. He started to get nauseated, started getting sick. And it took, we looked later when we was at the hospital, and it took EMS 9 minutes to get there. But that 9 minutes felt like an hour to us, just because he was just miserable, and it was terrible to watch, because I've never seen him like that. When EMS got there, first thing they did is take his blood pressure, and his blood pressure at the time was 258 over 150. And from anybody that knows anything, those are just numbers to me, but apparently that's way out of the normal. That's stroke level. That's you shouldn't be here level. And all the paramedics, they were just pretty much set back at how high it was. So they had to call another paramedic in there just before they could even transport him, because they had to have 2 paramedics in the back with him because his blood pressure was so deathly high. And so they had to wait on that other paramedic, and by this time we were in the car waiting on the ambulance to pull out. But it, again, felt like forever, but it probably wasn't that long. So then Dad was taken to Iredell. I drove Mama because she was a wreck. And Alexa drove Lydia to the hospital, just so we would have 2 vehicles there. Didn't know what was going on, didn't know how long we'd be there or whatnot. And Alexa followed us down there, and we couldn't keep up with the ambulance because they obviously could make it there much quicker. But we got there, and they kind of got us out of the emergency room waiting room, and they put us in this little holding room. I don't know what you call it, but I think they just realized you have more than a couple people, so we got to get you out of this waiting room. And in that waiting room, there was a lot of just waiting. We didn't get to see him when we got there. We didn't know where he was. And this security guard, I remember, it was really crazy. She'd come by here and she just poked her head in and she said, "I don't know about y'all, but if I were you, I'd be calling my pastor because it don't look good." And we were thinking, what do you know that we don't? We haven't got to see him, but you, I guess, have higher clearance than we do. And I remember telling her, and she kept talking to us, and it was kind of out of line, some of the things she was saying. But I told her, I said, the Lord's got a plan for this. We've been in contact with our pastor. We're just trusting that the Lord has a plan. He'll get us through this. Shortly thereafter, somebody came to get Mama. One of the doctors or nurses came to get Mama, and she was able to go see Dad at that time. We were informed that he had bleeding on the brain, and I thought, man, it's over. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't good. And he was being placed on a ventilator, and that's a scary thing to hear. I was thinking, man, this is not just something casual. And I got to go see him for a split second, but honestly, it was tough to see because there were so many doctors and nurses around him. He had a tube down his chest, and they had so many IVs going to him. He didn't look like himself. He was obviously unconscious, and that was all they could tell us. And then they told us that we were going to Baptist and we were going to be airlifted. And this immediately concerned Mama because her daddy passed away at Baptist having a heart procedure years ago when she was younger. And she said, "No, we are not going to Baptist." She said, "That's where my daddy died and we can't go there." And they said, it's either Baptist or nowhere because Atrium's full. There's no one else that'll take him, and Baptist has a bed. So if you want to get some care, you said you're going to have to go to Baptist. And at that point, that was our only option. So we were going to Baptist. We were moved back to the holding room. And in comes Elizabeth Harrington, which works with Dad a couple of days a week. She had been praying, and she had been texting saying she's praying. But she came in that room, and I remember she was praying with us. And then not far behind her came Brian Walker. And I remember Brian coming through there, and he said a prayer with us. And I remember even Bria had called earlier that evening, and she had prayed with us over the phone. And just knowing that these people were praying for us already gave us the peace that we knew people are praying. The Lord's got a plan. And so they confirmed, you're going to Baptist. You should probably head on. You should probably start making your way down there because he's going to be in a helicopter. He's going to get down there a lot quicker than we are. So we get our stuff and we go out to the waiting room, and there's a crowd of people there. I can't remember who all was there, but I know there's a lot of people from the church there praying and just seeing what they could do. I remember Billy sent us snacks. There was a ton of people there, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that I'm missing. But I remember seeing Brianna coming through the waiting room, and she's on the phone. And I didn't realize it, but at the time, she was on the phone with her floor, the neuro ICU at Baptist, wondering if they had beds, because she was suspecting they'll hopefully send him there. And just when we realized that, we thought, oh man, that's the Lord setting that up, because had her and Bradley not started coming here, a year ago, then we wouldn't even have had that connection to the neuro ICU at Baptist. But she was on the phone. She had been at work all day, but she had stopped there on her way home just because she had heard of what's going on and she wanted to be there to support. And so we made our way outside. Again, there was a lot of people praying, and I remember David Tao calling me. He said, "Hey, man, I know you don't want to talk." He said, "But we're getting a group together to go pray at church. Do you have any specifics that we can pray for?" And I thought, man, I mean, that's something that meant a lot to me, just knowing that we had a church that would come together that night. I think it was like 8 o'clock at night they were going to meet to have prayer. And I told David, I said, "We don't know much." I said, "We know he's bleeding on the brain, he's on the ventilator, and we're going to Baptist." And he said, "I love y'all, and we're praying, and just know if there's anything we can do, that they would take care of it." And so we made our way outside. There was a lot of people there. And I remember Brian asking me, he said, "Are you good to drive down there?" He said, "I'll be glad to drive you." But somehow through all this, it's only the Lord that I don't know, all the girls were upset. It was terrible. I mean, they were all crying. But I was somehow able to hold it all together, and I had a clear mind. And I told him, I said, "I don't know how it is." I said, "It's got to be the Lord that's just giving me this peace." And I was able to drive us down there, and Brianna actually volunteered to drive Alexa's car down there, and Tara rode with her. So she followed us down there, and because she said that Bradley was coming as well. So I said, "Well, if you don't mind," I said, "if you could just drive Alexa's car down there," because she wasn't in a condition to drive at this point. And I said, "That way, and then Bradley can bring you back." And she gladly did, and she drove us down there. She actually led us down there because we had no clue where we were going. I hadn't been to Baptist in a long time, and I had no clue where to go. So we made it to Winston, and people were texting us saying we're praying. There were people that stayed at the hospital to pray just as the helicopter came in and out. And they told us what time they left. I mean, we actually beat the helicopter down there, not just because they didn't leave as early as we thought they would. But thankfully, Brianna was there, showed us what parking deck to go to, showed us what entrance to go to, because we had no clue where we were going. She took us right in, and we got to the neuro ICU where we would spend a lot of time over the next little bit. And that first night, that was a long night, I remember. We got there, and we got to the neuro ICU, and there was a crowd of people, some of them that went with us. And it was a long time before we ever got any information. Brianna was trying to go look and see if she could find anything out. And she was able to find out when he was in the emergency room, but there's a lot of paperwork that's involved as far as when transport happens. And it felt like forever again that we were just sitting there waiting. And we finally had a doctor come out and somewhat explain what was going on. They had done another CT scan on his brain, and they hadn't seen any additional bleeding from when he first left Iredell. And again, Brianna had kind of gave us a crash course. She said more than likely they're going to put a drain in his brain, try to get some of this excess fluid and excess blood off. And that was kind of standard procedure, and that's exactly what the doctor came to tell us is, hey, we're getting ready to put this drain in his skull to drain some of this fluid off. And that was scary to me, and they brought a bunch of papers to Mama, and they said, there are a lot of risks associated with this, but you either have to weigh the risk of what do you do. I mean, the pros and cons of if you were to put this drain in or if you were not. And the cons definitely outweighed, the pros definitely outweighed what would have happened if we wouldn't have put the drain in. But we actually, the doctor, when she came out, we said, can we pray with you just over this procedure, that everything would go smooth, that everyone would be with all the medical people involved with this procedure. And Bradley prayed for Dad, the doctors, the medical team, just because we knew that was our only hope at this point. Sure, the doctors definitely knew what they were doing, but without the Lord involved, it would have been a totally different story. And it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when they came out and told us, okay, the drain's in, and we were able to go see him. Mama, Lydia, Alexa, and myself, and Brianna and Bradley were able to go back there and see him that night, and it was pitiful. He was fully on a ventilator. non-responsive. I mean, they would try to open his eyes, try to get him to squeeze our hands, and that's a terrible view that I remember, just seeing him laying there lifeless. I mean, you're not sure what's going on. They said they can't guarantee whether he's going to be responsive, whether he's going to be able to walk, talk, things like that. And Brianna had told us, she said, people do recover from this. She said it's not guaranteed a death sentence, but she said it's also not guaranteed that it's not. And so I don't think they could have had another IV bag hanging either. I mean, I remember just they had so many needles, so many IVs running into him, and it was terrible to see. And so after he was settled in the room, we were in the neuro ICU there. I told Mama and the girls, I said, y'all go home and y'all get you some clothes and try to get you a little bit of rest. I'll stay the night. There wasn't much left of the night at that point because we weren't supposed to have people back there at this time. They have strict visiting hours. And luckily we had a little bit of a pull with Brianna. She was able to get us back there. By that time, people had already been calling, saying, hey, what can we do? What can we do? We're praying for you. People had been paying for the SECU house for us to stay at, which was a blessing. It's 2 miles from the hospital compared to having to drive home every day. And we didn't know how long we would be there, but they told us to prepare for 10 days at minimum. And I remember we got to the SECU house and they said, it's been paid for at least 10 days, and they told us to call them back if it's not taken care of. If you're not out of here in 10 days, because people had already stepped forward and paid for it, and that was a blessing. And so they went home. They all got clothes, got showers. I think they laid down about 4:30 and probably left about 5 because visiting hours started again at 6, and they wanted to be back down here. So I didn't sleep. It's hard to sleep with all those monitors in that room, and you don't know what any of them mean, but you just feel obligated to watch it because they're watching it so closely. And so I actually have a picture to show you. This is kind of what our view looked like that day too, and this is him on a ventilator, and that's scary to see, and it's scary for me to even look back on. We didn't want to share these pictures, but it just shows us how far he's come. And you can see, I mean, they had tons of IV bags. He had a tube down his chest. He's restrained on his arms because he was reaching for his tube at one point. But Chuck, you can go ahead and kill that because I hate looking at it, honestly. And that second day, they ran a lot of tests on Daddy. They were able to do an angiogram, which is wild to me, that they can go up through your wrists and look in his brain. And they were able to see, yes, he had a brain aneurysm to rupture. And the neurosurgeons actually put metal coils in his brain when they were doing that scan. And they said that was able to secure the angiogram or the aneurysm so that it wouldn't bleed additionally. And he said he felt very confident about that procedure. But when they went up there to do that, they actually had a piece of the coil, which is metal, to fall down into one of his arteries at the time. And that was, he said he wasn't too concerned. He said it's definitely risky, but at that point they had to place him on blood thinners. And he said he's going to be on these blood thinners for a while because we don't want to risk this causing any further issues. It was very concerning to us, but we couldn't allow ourselves to get caught up in this because we knew we still had a journey to go down. This second day, we were actually able to get him to squeeze our hands a little bit, which was a good sign. We knew that at least he was a little bit responsive. He had movement in his hands. And he was still on the ventilators, and his eyes, they didn't open. It was a slow day, but they were just trying to get his medications figured out to see where his blood pressure was and all during this time. And by the end of that second day, we had gotten to know there's a lot of frequent flyers in this waiting room. They must have family here as well. And we actually got to know this other family there, and 2 boys about my age. And come to find out, of all places in the world, guess where they were from? Hiddenite. I mean, you're down there in Winston in the big old city, and there's 2 guys my age that I didn't know, and they were from Hiddenite. they were homeschooled, but their mama had the same kind of aneurysm that Daddy had. They were about 2 or 3 days ahead of us in this whole scenario. We were able to get to know them very, very well. We still talk to them quite often on Facebook. He sends me messages, "Hey man, how's your dad doing?" And they've become great friends to our family. They had a lot of the same situation, but when they left Iredell, the weather was bad, so their mom couldn't be transported via helicopter. And we thought, man, I mean, there's the Lord working right there. He was able to be transported. That's an answered prayer that we didn't even think about at the time, because they said, yeah, it took forever for us to get down here just because we had to wait on an ambulance. They said they couldn't fly us because the weather was bad. But it clicked, hey, there's one prayer, the Lord's already looking out for you. He was able to be transported by helicopter and be there a lot quicker. We really got close to them a lot, and we saw them every day for that time we spent in the neuro ICU. We were actually able to invite them to our church, and just hopefully we were able to show the love of Jesus to them, because it kind of clicked to us. The Lord's got us here for a reason. Obviously it seems bad to us, but He's going to do some good out of this. And on the third day, Daddy wouldn't even respond to the doctor's commands. It was scary. He was so sedated that he wouldn't move. There wasn't a lot of movement when we asked him to, but he was very agitated, and he was moving his arms, moving his feet. And when he's laying at home on the recliner, a lot of times his feet he'll cross his legs, and he would do that in the hospital. And the doctor's like, "What in the world is he doing?" And Mama said, "That's Glenn. That's how he lays at home." And sometimes, I mean, I have a picture of my phone where it looks like he's about to break his toes because his feet are literally just right on top of each other. But that's just how he lays, and I guess it's comfortable for him. But it was encouraging that we were able to see him cross his legs and lay like he lays at home. And the more agitated he got, and the more he was squirming, the higher his blood pressure went, and that was concerning to them. But that afternoon, they decided to lift Daddy's sedation medicines to see if they could possibly get him to wake up and to come off the ventilator. It seems like a short time to us, just thinking back. That was just about 2 or 3 days between when this actually happened to when they took him off the ventilator. And they took him off the ventilator about 4:30 that afternoon. And I'm telling you, when he came off the ventilator, he was talking to you like there was nothing wrong with him. I mean, he was chatting up a storm. "What happened to me? What's going on? What happened to me?" And we told him, I said, "Man, you had an aneurysm." I said, "But you would be amazed at the prayers we've seen answered for you already." And I remember him telling me, he said, "You better write them down." I said, "The Lord's extending your testimony." He said, "I've been knocked out." He said, "This is y'all's testimony, and you better write it down because somebody needs to share it if this is all true." And I guess y'all are stuck with me because nobody else wants to get up here and talk. But the Lord's been too good for me not to share. So he was off the ventilator, and we thought, man, he's out of the woods. He's talking. We're not going to have anything else to worry about. But about 2 hours later, his oxygen was not where they wanted it to be, and it kept dropping. And so they ended up saying, "Hey, something's not right. He's going to have to go back on the ventilator." And we'd already shared. He's off the ventilator, doing good, talking, knows us all. Everything seems great. But they said, "We're going to have to put him back on the ventilator, and we're going to have to put him back on there quick." And I remember Dr. Sarwal, she said, "Are you okay if we put you back on the ventilator?" And he said, "Do what you got to do. I'm tough." And he don't remember any of this. And I thought to myself, that's the truth. He's a tough cookie. And I knew that he was good with them doing whatever they had to do. But thankfully they were on top of it, because after they put him back on the ventilator a second time, they said he aspirated. And this had actually been happening. His oxygen was dropping because he had aspirated the first time. Whenever he was at home getting sick, and it had set up in his lungs. They said his lungs look horrible. They kept asking us, "Does he smoke? Does he vape?" And we told him no, he does not. But they said his lungs just look awful. So they put him back on the ventilator, and we really just had to sit down and we didn't know what to think at that point. But we really sat down and we looked back at the situation so far, and we'd seen a lot of prayers and just how the Lord had lined things up in this situation. And I wrote down some of these that we had talked about and discussed, because looking back, we can see how the Lord orchestrated all of these things, and it was really just gave us a peace looking back. So I'm going to go through this list, because when this happened, thankfully Daddy was at home. He's most of the time at work on the side of a mountain, no cell phone signal. He was at home, and Mama was right there with him. Had he not been by himself, had he not been with somebody, then this could have ended a lot worse. They said they gave us the percentage, and I know it was high, of people that never make it to the hospital with these. And they said after that percentage, there's another high percentage of people that never recover from this without major deficits. But that first thing we were able to see and be thankful for was Daddy was at home. And I was close. I was about 2 miles away. I was able to be there really quick. And Alexa was going to meet Lydia so they could really get back quick. Alexa could tell her what's going on instead of us having to figure out where is everybody and how do we get back. And Lydia was actually supposed to go to Skills USA with her school the next day. So that was another thing the Lord orchestrated. She had sub-plans for the rest of the week. And she was planning on being in Greensboro, but thankfully she had already had her classes taken care of, and that was one thing she didn't have to worry about. I was actually in Nashville a couple days before all this happened for work, and if this would have happened when I was there, I would have been all tore up. We were thankful that the EMS had safe travels. The weather was good so he could be airlifted safely. We made it to Baptist with no ticket and no accident, because I can promise you we were hauling down the interstate, and there was a trooper sitting there with a radar as we got into Winston. And we were thankful for a praying church, because as soon as people found out that this was happening, we were calling people on our way to Iredell. We were calling people on our way to Baptist, just seeing anyone we could get to pray. We were just asking for prayers, and we knew that our church would come together and pray and support us in prayer. And even if they didn't know what was going on, they would pray hard. And we're thankful that God placed Brianna and Bradley at Sulphur Springs, because I'm telling you, honestly, if Brianna wasn't with us, we would have been lost. We didn't know how to get there. We didn't know what any of this stuff meant. But she was right there beside us the whole way, because this is what she does every day. And if you ask any of her coworkers or any of her patients, they will tell you, we heard it from many of her coworkers, this is her mission field. They said she shows the love of Jesus to her patients, to her coworkers every day. And they said some of them don't agree with what she believes in, but she's sharing with them what she believes and how she believes, and she does it in a way that Christ would do it as well. There's a lot of people down there that don't believe the same way we do, but she's having those conversations that are hard to have. And I commend her for that, because there's no way that I could be as upfront as she is to her coworkers about some of their beliefs. But that's her mission field, and all of her coworkers would say the same, that she just shows the love of Jesus to her coworkers and to her patients. And we were thankful for that time that we were able to talk to Dad that afternoon. It really gave us a peace to know, hey, his mind's still good. He knows us. We had seen a lot of people in those couple of days, when we've seen donor walks going down the hallway of people that went through similar situations and they didn't make it. And that's scary to see. I've never in my life, I've heard of them, but seeing them is a totally different story. People fill the waiting rooms, and the medical personnel line the hallways, and it's sad. It's extremely sad. But we were thankful just that we were able to talk to Dad, had that assurance that his mind was still good. So he had been placed back on the ventilator, but that night, it was probably the second scariest night that all this had happened. So I stayed again with Daddy that night and sent the girls back to the SECU house. And the attending doctor, the same doctor that made the call to put him back on the ventilator, came in. And it was about 10 o'clock at this point. And she looked at me and she said, everyone in this room looks calm, but she said, this is a dangerous situation. She said, his lungs are not cooperating right. she said, at this point, we're putting him on a different ventilator mode. And all the nurses were just amazed. They were like, I've never seen this ventilator mode used. But Dr. Sarwal, she made that call. And she said, I could have left here at 4 o'clock. She said, but it's 10 o'clock. And I'm still here because she said, this is not a good situation. It's very high pressure. Everyone looks relaxed, but it's very dangerous. She said, I'm afraid that his lungs are going to overinflate and they're going to pop. And there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, man, I thought we were in the clear, just getting put back on the ventilator just to rest up for a little bit. But she sent somebody to get a 10-pound bag of sand. And they placed that bag of sand on his chest that night. And he had to stay with it on for 12 hours. And I remember sitting there watching the machine all night long. And I didn't tell the girls what was going on because I was thinking, if it gets worse, I'm going to have to, because she said if his lungs overinflate and they pop, she said there's nothing that we can do for him. So I made the call just to myself that I wasn't going to tell him unless they acted like things were getting worse, because I didn't want to keep them up all night. But I, of course, stayed awake all night watching his oxygen stats, even though there was nothing I can do. But I was just stuck watching the machine. And it was a nerve-wracking situation, but thankfully the Lord saw it fit that his lungs were able to heal. They let him sit with that bag of sand for 12 hours, and he had to stay on the ventilator for another couple days. And every time they tried to lower his sedation after this second time going on the ventilator, he would get so agitated, and he would almost come out of the bed just reaching for that tube. And if they had me restrained and I had no way to get out of there, I would probably be doing the same thing. But all the nurses were so encouraged that he was doing all this fighting. They thought that was good stuff, because they said the people that fight like that are the people that walk out of here. And they told us that multiple times. Sometimes he did open his eyes while he was on the ventilator. This time he would just look at us like, please help me, please help me. And that would break our hearts, because he's looking at us like he's calling us for help. There was nothing we could do. We would talk to him, we would hold his hands, but he was so frustrated. And it was just awful to see. And I think I have a picture here, Chuck. This is from when he was on the ventilator the second time, and Mama was just sitting there holding his hand because we were doing anything we could just to try to keep him calm. And Mom would sing to him. We would all just talk to him and just try to keep him calm. And you can cut that off, Chuck. And so on Saturday, April 22nd, they finally decided that he'd been on the ventilator long enough. They were going to do what they call the pull and pray method, which means they would try to lower the sedatives as low as they could, but he would still be heavily sedated. But they were just going to have to go for it and try to pull the tube out of his chest and hope that he was able to maintain his vitals. They said he's been on the ventilator long enough, but we can't lower his sedatives without him fighting us. I mean, he's pulling at everything, pulling his IVs. So they were able to take him off the ventilator that Saturday. But it was totally different from the first time he came off the ventilator. He wasn't talking to us. He was doing a lot of just groaning and just moving all around. And he finally would get where he would call us by name, but he would sit there and he would say, "Ethan, help me. Ethan, help me." And it was just a tough time, because we couldn't do anything to help him. He wouldn't tell us what's wrong, what's in pain. And he wouldn't say anything else other than, "Help me, please." He would pull at his restraints, and he was just constantly just getting agitated. He couldn't relax, and they were just having a hard time keeping him calm. And then so Monday the 24th, after not really talking to us for the last 2 days after he came off the ventilator, they had slowly been working on his medicines. And he woke up about midnight Monday night, and he just said, "Water, water." And I thought, well, there's something different. He's actually asking us for things. And the nurse came in with a sponge, and she was actually able to moisturize his mouth, which was better than he had had for the last week. And after getting that water, it's like a switch flipped. And he was talking to me from midnight on all the way to till 6 a.m. Where's your mama? What's your mama doing? Let's call her. I said, man, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't want to call her and wake her up. She'll be here as soon as that clock hits 6 o'clock. Because I had made a deal with Mama. I said, you have more medical knowledge. I want you to be here whenever the doctors come around during the daytime. I said, I'll pull the nights. I said, I want you to be here when the doctors come around because I don't understand anything they're saying. But I said, I promise you, as soon as Mama, the clock hits 6 o'clock, she'll be coming through that door. And one morning, we ended up calling her at like 4 o'clock just to suffice him because he had his days and nights all mixed up. But he was very talkative that night, and all the way up until the neurosurgeons came around at 6 o'clock in the morning. They would say, squeeze my right hand, squeeze my left hand, move your foot. And they were all impressed because he was doing all that stuff very well this time, and he had not been doing this previously. They were impressed just with his strength and how quick it started to come back. And there had been a little bit of a concern with his liver and kidney function in the past couple of days, which is obviously something else that we were worrying about. But the Lord already had it orchestrated. And they had worried about his platelets. They were worried about his multiple myeloma at this point, thinking something's going on with it. And there was this one, she was a doctor, but she's still in her training. I forget what they're called. Like a resident, that's what she's called. But she really studied into Daddy's case. And she was like, I think this looks okay. Here's my reasoning. And she shared that with the attending doctor, and the attending doctor seemed to agree. And it turns out everything was fine. There was no need for us to be concerned, but it was just another thing that we were worried about. And later that afternoon, he actually passed his swallowing test, so he could finally have some water and liquid for the first time. And I actually have a video of Brianna getting to feed him this afternoon.
Sip of this out of the side instead of the straw. Okay? Ready? Is that wear you out? Huh?
Man, that is so good.
Brianna, that is so good.
He's so grateful for you.
You want a sip of the Pepsi now?
Yeah.
We're going to try it out of the cup.
Just a little sip.
Just a little sip.
Hey, Libby,
Yes, what's up?
can we go to the,
Please do.
okay, same guy, 4 code, okay, 55 code coming.
Does that make you want to shout?
All right, you guys take care. Thank you. Thank you.
That is so good.
I am sure, I can tell that you're enjoying it very well. Very much so.
Makes your voice sound better too.
Yes.
It does. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it does.
I can't wait for Bradley to see your Botox lips. I told you I'd get him to bring you some socks too if you really want some. Take a sip of this out of the side instead of the straw. Okay?
That
Ready?
last joke, she said, I'm going to tell Bradley to get you some socks, because Daddy, ever since Bradley started coming here, Daddy's made fun of Bradley's socks. He said that he needs to just get some plain black socks and be done with it, but he said he needs him some big boy socks, and that's been the running joke ever since he started coming here. And you heard Daddy say, he said, I don't need those socks. But he was really had his days and nights mixed up at that time. And they said that's very common in the ICU. And he woke up about 2 o'clock that morning, and it was, Ethan, can you get me some Pepsi? Ethan, can you get me some Pepsi? And we were about 4 or 5 cans of Pepsi in by 5 o'clock, and they made a switch to Diet Pepsi at that point because his sugar was so high. But I was glad to get it to him because the man hadn't had anything to drink in over a week. And I'm sure with that tube down his chest, anything felt good at that point. He said, many times he said, this is the best tasting Pepsi I've ever had. And he was talkative all night long. His speech was very slurred. He was still on a lot of powerful drugs that really just messed with his mind, messed with how he was feeling. He was very chatty, but I was just encouraged and glad to hear him talk. He was even singing at one point, and I have a video of that, but I'm not going to share it with you because I don't want to run you all out. But he was actually singing a song called Under His Wings, and he was singing it to, as loud as he could at the time, and his voice was not strong. It was slurred, but I could definitely understand what he was singing. And Mama had been singing this song to him ever since he had been sedated, been on a ventilator, because he had been wanting Mama to sing this song for a while. And he was singing away. And then he said, Psalm 91. He said, that's good stuff. And that's what I'm going to read to you tonight. Out of Psalms 91, it says, He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. And I have that screenshot on my phone from it's 2 o'clock in the morning that night. And man, that just spoke to my heart. And that was the Lord saying, hey, I've got you under my wings. And I really needed that, because that was some encouragement. And Daddy kept talking about Psalm 91 that night. And that's going to be something that sticks with me for the rest of my life. Because the Lord had us under his wings at that time. And we were finally starting to see some real progress without some major setbacks. We began speech therapy and occupational therapy. And one day we met this lady she cleans the rooms in between patients. And she was seemed like she was having a bad day. And if you know Dad, you know he jokes with anybody. All the nurses he was trying to joke with. And she had just kind of opened up to us and said she was just going through a rough patch in her life. She was discouraged. She wasn't really sure where she'd been, where she needed to be, kind of had a hard home life. And she had been attending this church, but she didn't feel comfortable singing, didn't think she was good enough. And Dad said, well, sing for us. And she broke out into song, singing a Maverick City song right there in the hospital room. And Dad said, man, he said, I don't know who's telling you shouldn't be singing, but you should be on the front singing and just lifting up the Lord. And Dad was actually able to share part of his testimony with that girl that day about how he had been through his multiple myeloma, how the Lord had worked through that situation. And she just broke down in tears in that room. And that was just another sign that we were where we were supposed to be. And I hope that we shared the love of Jesus the way that it should be shared, because our paths crossed for that reason. And she definitely made our day. And I hope that something we said may have impacted her as well. And we soon realized after Dad was having his double vision, and it was affecting his balance and making him dizzy. And they ended up getting him a patch in the hospital. And then he starts asking around. He said, y'all have any swords back there? If I'm going to be a pirate, he said, I should just make the most of it. And we went on with that joke for a while. We'd walk down the hall a little bit, and he'd be going to the nurse's station saying, "Arg!" Just acting like a pirate, which they all enjoyed. But after this, we went back and forth for a couple days on what they call a clamp trial, because what was really keeping us in the ICU at this point was he still had that drain in his skull. And we went back and forth on this because they would clamp it for a little bit. And the first day he was only able to keep it clamped for 3 hours without it spiking tremendously. And they were concerned that they would have to put a shunt in, which for most people wouldn't bother them in any way, but they were concerned because he was on blood thinner. They said aneurysm, blood thinner, and a shunt. They said that's going to be a risky procedure, and we don't want to do that if we don't have to. So the first time it only lasted 3 hours, and we were all discouraged after that. But we were, after that trial, we had people start praying. We said, hey, please pray that they're able to keep this clamped, because they had to keep it clamped for 48 hours and maintain a normal pressure before they were able to remove it. We had a lot of people praying, and they would get him up to walk, and he couldn't balance still very well, and he really couldn't walk well, and he didn't have much energy. But he was able to maintain after people started praying, after we started reaching out saying, please just pray for these specific things that we need him to keep this pressure low for 48 hours. The Lord saw it fit that prayer was answered for us as well, right in front of us. And that second time on the clamp trial, they were able to remove the drain from his brain. And they put stitches in where the drain was in, but they were having such a hard time keeping it closed. The stitches wouldn't hold, and he would start to leak fluid. And one time I remember Brianna saying, "Glenn, you just dripping cerebral fluid and brain fluid all over the place." And Daddy looked at her like, "You mean this is brain fluid because it looked like water?" And she said, "Absolutely." She said, "That's brain fluid that you're leaking." And they were really having a hard time. And they said, "If this doesn't get better, we're going to have to do a shunt." But the Lord just really took care of him during this time. The pressure stayed low. He didn't show any of the side effects from the other things they were watching for. But we finally got moved out of the ICU, and they kicked us to a regular room, but they still couldn't get stitches to hold. And the doctors were in and out, putting more stitches. And then I remember this doctor coming in the last time, and he said, "This is all we can do." He said, "Let's cross our fingers and send up a prayer to the good Lord that this stitch will hold." And I said, "Hey, man, can we pray over this stitch?" And he said, "Absolutely." So we prayed over that doctor and over that stitch that it would hold, and that was the last stitch we needed. And the Lord just saw something that seemed so small for us. He saw it fit that He answered that prayer, and they didn't have to do anything additionally for that. And we finally got out of the regular room. We were moved to the stick center, and I have another picture here. It's my next to last picture. This is us whenever we were graduating physical therapy in the stick center. And we did a lot of therapy there, and they were very professional. And then my last picture is on May 12th, just a few short days after we were able to come home. We came home on May 10th, but you can see he progressed quickly. You can see how bad he was at the beginning, and then here he is back to being hard-headed, stubborn, carrying this thing around, not even using the walker after he got home, even though they gave him strict orders, "You need to use this." And throughout this whole situation, the Lord was using this really to strengthen our faith in a lot of ways and to teach. I remember driving home one day. I had to take Mama's car to get brakes from David Tao, and the Lord spoke to me, and it's like He just spoke to me, and He told me that, "Hey, you're going to learn patience through all of this," because that's something that I struggle with a lot. Alexa could tell you I'm probably one of the most impatient people. I hate traffic. I hate a crowd. I hate waiting for anything. But the Lord really taught me patience and taught me that I was going to have to just sit there and trust in Him because His timing is superior. And He really gave me a peace that day as I was driving Mama's car home and just reminded me just to trust in Him. And one of our recent Sunday school lessons was when Jesus was calming the storm and all the disciples were worried. He was sleeping, and all the disciples were just in fear of all these big waves. And that reminded me, we saw a lot of big waves, and we're quick to get caught up in watching these big waves, and we forget who's in control a lot of times. These waves are big. These waves are scary. These waves aren't going to stop, but we know who can calm that storm. And that's something that just in Sunday school just spoke to me, and the Lord really gave me a peace about this situation. We don't know how long everything's going to be good, but He's in control. We can get caught up in looking at the waves, but we should just trust that the Lord's got it under control, and He can calm those seas. And there was just a lot of times that scared us, but we learned to really put our faith in Him through it. And as you can see, the Lord's answered a lot of prayers for us, and we're very thankful. And thankful just to have a praying church, because y'all have been our rock through all of this. And without y'all and without the Lord, there's no way that He'd be sitting back here and doing as well as He's doing. And I just want to thank y'all publicly for that. And that's about all I got, but it went a lot longer than I expected, so I'm sorry. But I'll turn it back over to James now.
Thank you, Ethan. And two things that I was reminded just now. One, Glenn has a brain. Lord proved that to us. And Psalm 67, verses 1 and 2, it said, "May God be gracious to us and bless us and cause His face to shine on us, that your way may be known on the earth and your salvation is among all nations. Let the people praise you. Oh God, let all the peoples praise you." As I thought through that, and as he was talking, may God be gracious upon us. And has He not been gracious to us as a nation, as a people, as a church? and also to the Dancy family. So I'm thankful for that this evening. With that being said, we'll close in prayer and get you out of here. Lord, thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for your blessings. Thank you for this testimony and bringing this answer to prayer back to our minds and back to our remembrance. Pray that we often remember how good you are to us and how gracious you are to us. I pray, God, that you would help us as we go from here, as we serve you, as we love you, as we honor you in the nation that we're in the country that we're in the city that we're in, that we would lift your name high and that all the nations would hear that you are good. We love you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. I think the worship team is going to practice, so